BBC Essex.
Just gone 9:15 then, 9:16 to be precise. And we were hearing from a family here in the county who've been living in a relatively new build property and some of the issues that have subsequently, fairly serious issues at that have subsequently come to light. Well, Matt Lanninge, aka the property expert, joins me now on BBC Essex, experienced property consultant, estate agent and buying agent. Matt, thank you for coming on this morning. Morning to you.
Good morning, Sonia. Thank you for having me on.
Now, we can't go into sort of too many specifics about this particular case. Obviously, we haven't named the person involved, as you probably picked up on as well. But
Sure.
more broadly, how widespread are these sorts of issues? Is this something that's been on your radar before?
It has, believe it or not. It was certainly not as serious as that family's case, but it is becoming more and more common, unfortunately, that home builders are over-promising, under-delivering, or cutting corners. And it's something you've really got to be cautious of when you're buying a new build property, for sure.
What do you think's prompting this then? Why do you think it's becoming more common? Is it because developers are trying to save money, or is it because of time pressures in terms of trying to get some of this housing up? Or, I mean, what's going on?
Yeah. I mean, money has to play a factor, doesn't it? I think that a lot of people are trying to rush these things up. A lot of properties that are being built are leaseholds. They're sort of boxes upon boxes, and they're not being built to the highest possible standard, for sure. It doesn't apply to every possible new build, of course. I'm not blanketing that, but I think you've got to be really cautious when you're buying a new build. You're probably paying a premium price. Because it's a new build property, because it looks glam from the outside, but you do need to make sure you're doing your proper research in advance.
There is a sort of saying, isn't there? They don't build them like they used to. It does seem to be a little bit apparent from that suggestion then, in terms of the overall structure compared to, say, like your Victorian buildings or whatever.
Oh, without a doubt, and bear in mind all the regulation changes that have happened since Grenfell Tower. You've got cladding issues now for a lot of leasehold properties, still ongoing today in 2023. Grenfell Tower was 2016. It's crazy to think that is still ongoing. You've now got insulation issues that have surfaced. Spray-on insulation is another new problem that people have come across. So it's unbelievable, some of the things that are now being done in order to cut corners, maybe speed up the building process, but actually long term will not create a very good product.
There are loads of regulations. I would have thought that, as you said and rightly pointed out, not all new builds have issues. Not all developers have issues. In some cases there are issues, and you're saying you're seeing sort of growing number of that. But isn't there loads of regulations and rules that, someone with a clipboard's going around checking it all off? You'd think none of this would be an issue with a new build, would you?
Yes and no. I mean, there are, again, ways round. There are things that developers can be doing to, and again, everything's been sort of, especially during COVID times, have been hyper sort of sped up. How can we speed it? How can we just take a photo and send it off, as opposed to getting someone to come and visit? There's been a lot of speeding up of the process, which perhaps has had an impact. And also there is a definite divide between the regulators and the builders. That's always been the case, and it's probably become even more so. And builders often now are cutting corners where they shouldn't and disguising things where they shouldn't. And regulators also are perhaps being a little bit more negligent than they have been in the past. But again, you've got to look at it on a case-by-case basis. You can't be too blanket with these sort of comments.
Yeah, of course. And we don't want to sort of scare the living daylights out of people who are in new builds or looking to move into a new build or buy a new build. So, if people are in that position and they're looking to move into a new build, Matt, what kind of advice would you give then in terms of checking all of this as much as you can? Because if you don't work in that industry, you don't know what you're talking about. You're not an expert, are you? But you want to make sure you're spending your money on something that you can stay in and that's safe.
No, indeed. I think the key thing, especially if you're buying from a small builder, I would say definitely go as far as to get a proper structural survey done. Don't be afraid to ask questions. Ask for photographs from the build. I mean, and send them to someone who really knows their stuff and is either a structural surveyor or a form of building surveyor. But again, there are different qualities of building surveyor, there are various different levels. So you do need to make sure you're speaking to the right people, and don't be afraid to speak to as many as possible. You are about to spend hundreds of thousands, or have spent hundreds of thousands. just make sure that you're satisfying yourself. Get a report done for £1,000. Make sure it's done. And one big top tip that I'd give to everybody is you can arrange something called home buyers insurance, which a lot of people don't know exists, which covers that cost. So if the survey is going to cost you £1,000, arrange an insurance that will cost you £100, and then that cost is covered. You will recover that cost in the event that problems are found and you have to withdraw from the property. Then you will recover that cost. If you don't have to withdraw from the property, you can then satisfy yourself that you've done the right thing.
There's no harm in you moving into a new build, because I've lived in older properties before where they say, you know, get the full bells and whistles survey because you're moving into an older property. It's been around a lot longer. But, you know, you would recommend getting that really detailed enhanced survey, even if it is a new build, then would you?
Absolutely. If you irrelevant of the type of property, I think the key
Yeah.
thing is make sure you're getting professional advice. I think you're about to spend hundreds of thousands of pounds probably if you're in Essex. So don't go spending that without getting some serious professional advice. Don't just do it on the basis that the developer says, yeah, it's fine.
And could you go, so you got the survey and there was issues, or maybe you weren't quite satisfied or confident in what you got back. Could you then go and get another survey from a different company? Obviously, if you're willing to shell out, could you do that and say, right, I'm just going to get a second opinion?
Yeah, of course you can. Yeah, absolutely. You can have as many opinions as you like. I mean, developers can be a little bit cheeky and put time pressures on things, but in the current climate where the market's not quite as strong, you'd like to think that developers will be a little bit more accommodating with that sort of thing. Of course, there'll be times when if the market picks back up again, which I'm sure it will in the next few years, then those time pressures will return. I'm sure where people are expected to exchange and complete in 21 days or 28 days. But I would say don't get into that position where you're having to be pressured into something. I think there are plenty even though there is a shortage of properties in the UK, I think you do need to make sure that you're taking your time. And there are people that have refurbished their homes that have been standing for 100 years. You can get the benefit of a new build property, but not necessarily have to buy a new build property, if you know what I mean.
Matt, thank you very much for coming on. Some really useful information there. Matt Lanning, who is the property expert on BBC Essex.